Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our drop-in demo series. I'm Gary McAuliffe, and I lead the sales team here at Pureport. I've got Peter Spergata, our CTO, with me as well. He'll be conducting the deeper technical discussion in the demo portion of today's webinar. This is our fourth webinar in our drop-in demo series. We've developed the series as an opportunity for you to engage with Pureport as a low-pressure way to investigate our platform and see how it enables the interconnection of cloud networks. At the end of the presentation, we'll have some time for questions, so please feel free to enter your questions into the GoToWebinar console, and we'll address them at the conclusion of the demo. In today's topic, multi-cloud networking as code with Terraform, we'll show you how the Pureport multi-cloud fabric allows customers to leverage the Pureport Terraform provider to spin up multi-cloud networks in minutes, leveraging the same tools you may be using to provision your cloud infrastructure resources. You go next slide, please. I'm honored to have Peter with me today, as he's really been at the forefront of the automation and orchestration movement. He joined us from Red Hat, where he was the chief architect for Ansible and led many of their efforts in network automation. We'll actually be doing a follow-up webinar specific to Ansible later this summer, and look for an email announcing that webinar over the next few weeks. We'll spend the majority of our time today in the technical discussion and demo portion, but I did want to give a little bit of context before I turn it over to Peter. So let's get started. Next slide, please. I think it's evident that the era of multi-cloud is here. In Flexera's annual State of the Cloud report this year, they said that 93% of large enterprises are now leveraging a multi-cloud strategy. Until now, though, stitching clouds together has been extremely complicated and expensive, requiring significant lead times, often some pretty significant manual configurations, deep networking knowledge, and significant investments in infrastructure. In the world where most other IT functions have become very simple and fast and virtual, cloud networking remains cumbersome, slow, complicated, and expensive. Very non-cloud-like, if you will. Next slide. But what if you didn't need to invest in expensive infrastructure or take the 30, 60, or 90 days that's typically associated with a traditional network build? Next slide. Pureport's mission is to enable our customers to build cloud networks connecting any cloud via any connection type, all in one easy-to-use fabric. Our goal is that our customers' cloud networks are as dynamic as their cloud resources, allowing them to spin up connections in minutes as their business dictates, and then spin them back down when they're no longer needed. We believe that static networks will no longer completely support the needs of a modern and agile business. Next slide. We fulfill our mission by delivering a network service that allows customers to build virtual cloud-native networks supporting both hybrid and multi-cloud architectures. It can be automated, orchestrated, and consumed on demand. If your developers want to leverage a new functionality in a different cloud, the network can accommodate. If you want to burst to the cloud for end-of-year processing, no problem. If you want to buy a new company and you need to connect those their cloud resources to your cloud resources, it can be done in an afternoon. And if, as recently we've all seen, you have to move 90% of your staff to work from home, the network can accommodate it. The bottom line is that the agile enterprise needs an agile network. And we call our solution, next slide please, the multi-cloud fabric. Our goal is to seamlessly orchestrate connectivity to the top cloud providers, spinning up connectivity in minutes versus days, weeks, and months. Our solution is fully layer 3, and it allows customers to build virtual dedicated networks connecting their clouds and sites in a common fabric on demand. We built the solution as fully programmable in a modern API architecture, and customers can write directly to our API. They can leverage tools like Terraform and Ansible, or they can build their networks with our API-driven user interface we call the Pureport console. As customers, those seek to automate their infrastructure builds in the clouds, often referred to as infrastructure as code, it only makes sense that the network connecting to those cloud resources should leverage a lot of the same capabilities. This network as code strategy allows the network to support the needs of the business by having on-demand access to spin up any cloud, any connection, all in one fabric. So I'm going to turn it over to Peter. He's going to dig a little deeper into the components of our architecture that are very specific to this infrastructure and network as code elements and vision. And then we'll end the presentation with a quick demo of how to leverage those elements with our approved Terraform provider. And then, as I mentioned, we'll conclude with questions if anybody on the call has questions. So Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you, let you talk a little bit about the components, and then maybe we do a quick demo.
Great, thanks, Gary. And thanks to all of you for joining. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you may be joining us from. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to spend a few minutes with us. So as Gary said, I'm going to spend some time talking about really, the investment we're making around developing a suite of tools that really kind of enhance the developer experience around leveraging the Pureport fabric. I've been building and operating networks for 25 plus years, and I've been writing software to interface with those networks for about the same amount of time. And as I'm sure many of you can agree, it gets frustrating at times when you think about, just how, as Gary said, how cumbersome and how slow it is to ultimately be able to interface with the ability to interconnect networks, and specifically cloud networks, together from a point of view of writing software. So one of the areas that was a big priority for me is to really focus on, not only providing a platform that provided multi-cloud capabilities, but then also making the equal levels of investment in delivering an API, a functional API that we could leverage in in DevOps tooling, in frameworks such as Terraform, which we're going to go through today, so that you can integrate network functionality direct into your own applications and consume networking in the same way that you consume any other cloud service. So we're going to really kind of touch on three key components to our developer resource strategy. The first one is our Fabric SDK, and we'll talk a little bit about what that is. That really kind of forms the base for everything we do. We'll touch on the Fabric console. In fact, we'll actually see the Fabric console in operation a little bit, as we work through some of the demo elements. And then Fabric CLI, which we won't really show in the demo today, but I think it's worthy of mentioning, that it's out there and what its capabilities are. So it really starts with Fabric SDK, and Fabric SDK is really all about our API. Everything we do at Pureport is done around the API. Much like organizations build and consume cloud services, there's a whole there's a whole perception around how to properly implement and or provide API functionality around many of these cloud service platforms, and really Pureport's no different. We didn't try and take and bolt an API on top of some legacy infrastructure and call it a day. We've really built this from the ground floor up to be an API-enabled platform, and that's really what Fabric SDK is all about. A couple of just interesting touch points around when I say we're an API-first organization. Everything we do is based on its API. In fact, our operational systems and in the systems that we run in production are actually all only touched by our API. We actually have no human intervention in our operational environments. It's all done through API and API functionality through leveraging DevOps frameworks and tooling. So, and I point that out because, I think it's a subtle but very important point, because we live in this world too. And I think that, it was really important to me that we deliver a SDK and an API functionality that really resonates with you and the things that you need to do. Certainly, the first application we built on top of our API for interfacing with our platform is our self-service, web-based console. And it provides all of the feature functionality that you get from what you'd expect from a point-and-click interface. The ability to create all of our native primitives, the ability to be able to orchestrate the construction of networks and connections such that we can tie together clouds without having to deploy expensive legacy big iron network gear. And then, of course, it also acts as our single point of interface into operationally how we then continue to monitor and or look at the performance of our multi-cloud networks and our multi-cloud infrastructure. But as I said, the other element to that is our Fabric CLI, and really it's the yin to the yang, if you will, as it relates to our web console. you get all the same functionality, but you get it in a CLI form factor. So instead of, if you're not a point and click person or you've got operations teams that would prefer to just work from the CLI, we have the ability that you can just download and install and run the CLI and get all the same feature functionality. However, to be honest, the SDK is great, the console is wonderful, and the CLI gives us a lot of functionality, but that's not why we're here. We're really here to look at how we've integrated with Terraform. So that's really where I want to spend a bulk of my time today. Because having the API is one thing, but being able to leverage a number of the big frameworks out there, obviously Terraform being one of the most popular ones, was really important to how we built out our integration. So we're going to run a little demo here, and what that demo is going to do is it's effectively going to build what you see here on my screen. It's actually going to build a cloud connection from Google to Amazon, or from Amazon to Google, depending on what your perspective is and how you want to look at it. And we're going to do that by transiting across the Pureport fabric. And we're going to build all that from a single Terraform run, such that once that Terraform run completes, we'll actually have full-on IP connectivity from Google to Amazon. I'd also like to point out down at the bottom of the screen is that what I'm going to run here in my demo today is all available to you. Don't take my word for it. Try it out for yourself. All of this code is already up in GitHub today. You'll find it at github.com/pureport/drop-in-demo-terraform, and that's the exact same code that I'm going to run today. So I would encourage you to pull it down, take a look at it, scrutinize it, ask questions about it, or use it in your own environment, and that's why it's there. Okay, so getting into the actual demo side of things, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to launch the Terraform run here, and then we're going to come back, we're going to talk about it a little bit. And one of my reasons for doing that is, while we're able to create connectivity relatively quickly, some of the clouds tend to be a little bit slower. So I want to get the Terraform run started, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on. But a couple of things just to kind of set the scene. What you're looking at here is, on the left-hand side is, of course, my terminal interface, and on the right-hand side is the Pureport web console, where we can actually see that today we've got no networks built, no connections anywhere. And I can just verify that by switching over to Google, and I can see that on the Google side, I've got nothing built here on my interconnect side. And if I switch over to Amazon, I can see that I've got nothing built here. I've got no virtual interfaces defined. So basically, we've got a whole lot of nothing is basically what that means. So to get started, I've already went ahead and cloned my repo. And then the first thing I need to do, of course, as we know from a Terraform perspective, is we need to init it. So I'm going to go ahead and run Terraform and init, and it's going to take care of the responsibility of making sure that everything is ready to roll and that we're good to go, and it's pulled down any and all providers that we need. So that work is now done. And we're going to go ahead and and for this sake, let's run through a Terraform plan real quick. And I've got a vars file. We'll talk through what this looks like here in just a minute. Let me just go ahead and get this rolling here. So we got our default vars. We'll run through a plan and just make sure everything looks good from a Terraform perspective, and that we don't have any problems with what we want to ultimately deploy. And then we'll get this thing rolling, and then we'll go back and actually look at what we're doing while it's off and running. So everything looks good here. We're going to build some elements in Pureport. We're going to build some elements in Google Cloud, and we're going to build some elements in AWS. So with that, let's go ahead and get this party started. And it's going to, of course, ask me to confirm in just a moment, and we will be off and on our way. Now, what this implementation looks like I said, is all available in that GitHub repo, and we'll actually look at what it's doing here in just a second once we get it started. Okay, so we're off and running. So while that's running, let's go take a look at what's going on behind the scenes. It really obviously all starts here. And what we're going to do with this implementation while that's running is we have leveraged 3 providers for this. Obviously, Pureport has written a provider, and we make that available through the Terraform website. You can download that as you download any other provider for Terraform. And then we're also leveraging, obviously, the AWS and the Google providers. So what this gives us the ability to do is not only build the Pureport side of the connection, but we're also able to build the cloud side of the connection as well by leveraging Terraform. And so therefore, that's how we get to a place where we can actually build a full end-to-end connection. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to build some virtual networks and VPCs. We're going to build one in Google. We're going to build one in AWS and make sure that those are up and running and ready to go. And then we're also going to build essentially the same logical construct in the Pureport world. So we're going to build a virtual network, and that's what's going to be responsible to act as our transit network between the VPC running in Google and the VPC running in Amazon. From there, we're going to simply call two modules, one for building the connection to Google and one for building the connection to Amazon. Now, these are modules that Pureport provides to the Terraform community. We are in the process of wrapping up development of the first iteration thereof, and those will all be available via the Terraform registry, as we wrap up the final bits of that and make that available. So as I said, we are going to go look at the specific variables that we've gone ahead and we've put in place. So what we're doing is we're actually going to build, like I said, a network on the Pureport side, on the Google side, and the Amazon side, and we're just going to simply name that drop-in demo. So that'll be the name of the network. And then we're also going to specify that our Google region for this particular instantiation is going to be US Central 1, and the AWS region is going to be US West 2. Now, what's significant about this, and I think what I wanted to highlight here, is that our Terraform implementation is smart enough to be able to take the information that you've given it in terms of which regions you're connecting, in this case, US Central 1 for Google and US West 2 for US West 1 for AWS, and then it automatically will map that to the closest Pureport location. So you don't have to try and figure out how to match up Pureport locations with cloud locations when you're leveraging the Terraform implementation, or specifically our module implementation. We actually will figure that out, and we will map it to the closest ingress point to keep your throughput and your latency performing at its absolute best. So we can see that things are running. If I switch back to my Pureport console, and let's go ahead and check in real quick. If I drop down to my networks, I can see that sure enough, I actually have a network now that has been created, and that network is, of course, entitled drop-in demo. And if I were to take a quick look, I can see I've got two connections, which is what I would expect, and I've got two locations. And diving in just a little bit deeper, I can see that that we've actually built a connection now to Google, and we've actually built a connection to AWS. In fact, the one to AWS is still in the process of being spun up and process of coming up. But as I just mentioned, I talked about the fact that we automatically will map to the appropriate Pureport locations. So the Terraform module was able to understand that because you chose US Central, that the closest Pureport location, of course that's in Iowa, is Chicago. So it automatically mapped it to our Chicago POP and is bringing up that connection running at 50 meg. The other thing is that on the AWS side, you told it US West 1 in this case, which of course is in Oregon, and the closest location, is in Seattle, and the closest location there is going to be Seattle, so we automatically map there. So we get that, and we didn't have to tell Pureport how to solve that problem. The other thing that I think is very important to point out here is when you're looking at these connections, and as these connections are in the process of coming up right now, you can see that we have two gateways on each connection. Much like my diagram showed, by default, Pureport gives you a high availability IP connection. And I think that that's a really important point that I want to make sure to highlight here. The way that we've constructed our service and the way that we offer our service is with the understanding that nobody wants to single thread their network connectivity, that it actually needs to be multi-threaded or multiple connections. In fact, so much so that we actually provide, because we're a layer 3 service, we actually provide full ECMP routing over the two connections or gateways in the Pureport parlance. We actually provide full connectivity then into each one of the clouds. So as these are coming up, let's take a quick look at going back to our Google side. We can see that sure enough, we've got connections that are built in Google. And if I do a quick refresh on my page, you can see that sure enough, my two Google connections have now come up. I now have full IP reachability into the Google Cloud. If I switch back to my Pureport side, and I actually look at my Google Cloud connection, we can see that I've got a primary gateway that is now receiving routes from its peer in Google. So this is Google sending it all of the subnets, because I did a global routing mode for my VPC. So I'm actually receiving all of the routes now from Google, and I'm making those available for any other device connected to this particular network. And then as I scroll down here, I can see in my secondary gateway, of course, again, I've got all my BGP routes, and they're up and running. And as Amazon continues to come up, in fact, let's go take a quick look at and see how things are going in the Amazon world. We can see that, first my page, you can see that we're still building connections here. In fact, there they are. We've got one that's now built and available. We got one that's pending. And what Terraform is doing right now is it's just simply waiting for these connections to be fully provisioned on the Amazon side. And then once those connections are fully provisioned, we'll be able to actually then build a BGP connection to them, and we will have full routing from our Google Cloud into our Amazon Cloud. So this is one of the areas where I was telling you about. I've been working with Amazon over the last day or so, and it's been running relatively slow. And sometimes they are a little bit slower in provisioning their connections. So we're just waiting for the VPN gateways, the direct connect gateways to associate, and then the final connections to come up, and then we build the virtual interfaces, and we'll have full-on connectivity across our cloud. But while that's coming up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just walk you through a little bit more on the Pureport console. So within the Pureport console, we've been looking at the native primitives of network and connection, and those are really kind of the two base services that we ultimately provide to our customers. We also have the ability to fully manage and operate your networks from our web console. So as you saw, as I was going into some of the connections, I can actually get information about how much traffic is being passed. If I were to go back to my dashboard, of course, we won't see much, but I can actually see that, I can see how much traffic is actually passing across my transit networks. So I can get a sense of, how much bandwidth is being utilized between Google and Amazon. The other thing that I have full-on access to within my web console is I have full access to the API. So we build our entire API spec using Swagger, so it's fully open API compliant, and therefore you can pull it down. We also provide, in addition to our Terraform provider, our Terraform provider is actually built on top of a set of Golang bindings that we've written and maintained. So you can actually directly integrate as well, if you so choose, any of the Pureport API functionalities directly into your applications. We also have bindings for Python as well, if you're interested. And then beyond that, the last part of the console really is all about just doing account administration, and the fact that not only can I manage my ID, but if I have a scenario whereby I'm managing the connections, but I want to give out access to departments in my organization, to other users, give out API access, etc., I can actually manage all of that right through my Pureport console. In addition, I can also manage, as you'd expect, any billing information with the implementation. So taking a quick peek here, we can see that Terraform is still on its way. We are actually now building the AWS connection still. If I switch over to my virtual interfaces, we're still waiting for those to come up, and actually I think where it's hung up at the moment is actually, should be in the direct gateway. And we can see, yeah, that the direct gateway is still trying to associate with the direct connect, the VPN gateway, excuse me, the virtual gateway is still trying to associate with the direct connect gateway. And that's where the slowness is. So it's kind of interesting if you think about it, from the aspect that we're able to get a full network built up and running, but where we kind of get hung up is really kind of just waiting on AWS. And this process will eventually finish, and we will have full routing capability across. But the Pureport side is actually done, and it's actually just sitting there right now waiting for the AWS side to finish up.
Peter, you want to take a question while we're?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
Yeah, looks like we've had a couple come in. So first question, just I'm assuming that you have similar capabilities in Azure, is the question.
Yeah, so let me talk about that for just a second. So today, the Pureport network module that we provide has, we've written the implementation for connecting over AWS and for connecting to Google. The next one on the list, so to speak, is Azure, and followed closely there by Oracle And as well as we also will be integrating our site VPN and port capabilities. So in addition to doing multi-cloud, we also across the Pureport fabric have the ability to terminate VPN connectivity, as well as being able to terminate direct port capabilities. So we'll actually be able to do that through Terraform as well, and we're actually adding all that functionality into the provider, or excuse me, into the module, and we will make that available in the coming weeks.
That's interesting segue to the second question, which is any other plans for your Terraform provider going forward, or any other elements as part of that solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we continue to build out our module integrations, we will continue to look at areas where we can simplify the building of cloud connectivity, because that's really what this is all about. So we have a number of features that are slated to come later this year in our module implementation. So keep your eye on the Pureport modules that are coming, and just trying to make things easier, faster, more convenient for actually building cloud native networks using the Pureport fabric.
Great. If anybody else has questions, feel free to log them into the GoToWebinar control panel. I'd be glad to address them.
So I thought I would just go ahead and point out here. So BGP is in the process of coming up right now. We can see that the first gateway on the Amazon side is now up. And when I go into the BGP routing table, I'm looking at from the Google side, I can see that sure enough, I now have a route to Amazon, and it's telling me that the next hop is actually connection 5C8. A84, which is my Amazon side. And when I click on that, I can now see my routing table the opposite way, and I can see all the routes are now populating. So at this point, I have full IP connectivity from my VPC in AWS to my VPC in Google, and I've done that without having to deploy a single piece of hardware, and I can now have my workloads talking to each other directly over IP.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's really, it's a long time coming, right? So that really kind of concludes the demo side of this, but I will turn this back over to Gary, and he can take us the rest of the way home.
Yeah, if you just go to that last slide, that would be awesome. So we will distribute a copy of this recording, and we would ask that you not only maybe listen, but pass it along to your colleagues that might be interested. We continue to want to be involved in opportunities where we can help people with their automation and orchestration plans. We would love to do that. Next week, we are going to do a specific webinar, very specific to Google Cloud Interconnect. And so it'll be kind of the last of this early spring summer series called the Drop-In Demo Series. As I mentioned earlier in the conversation, we do intend to have a full Ansible webinar later this summer. And if you attended today, or if you're in our database, you'll definitely get notified of that. We look forward to leveraging Peter's tremendous knowledge from his background there and showing how Ansible and Pureport work together to deliver cloud networks. So thank you all for attending today. Thanks for your time. And please reach out. You can reach out to me, and I'd be glad to connect you with our team, or go to our website. Anytime we can help you move and speed the business, or the agility of your business by how you connect to the clouds, we'd love to do so. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.